Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Amicable Divorce Network podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Ann Moore Grant. We have made it all the way to chapter 3, and as you know, we are going chapter by chapter through our book, Divorce Amicably, Your Roadmap to Resolution. We have 40 different professionals, over 80 different topics. And so if you're interested, hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss any of the episodes. Today, I am joined by Kathryn Harry, and she was a major contributor to our book. So you will see that she has written several chapters. The one that we are covering today is a question I think we both get a lot from people who are contemplating divorce. They're just not quite sure. And so we are talking about the difference between a legal separation and filing for divorce. Kathryn is a Georgia and Illinois family law attorney, so we're going to pull in those different perspectives. Thank you for joining me today, Kathryn.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So we both probably have had a lot of consults with people who are in that, do I move forward? Do I not? And a common question, of course, I'm sure that we both get is people will say, what is a legal separation and how is that different from divorce? So you wrote a chapter on this, so you're our new expert. So what is a legal separation?
Well, thanks, Tracy. A legal separation is not the same thing as a divorce, obviously. It varies from state to state. Legal separation typically means that you are still married to your spouse. However, you have chosen to make some plans, terms of an agreement, if you will, for various different issues related to a divorce, but stay married rather than getting divorced and addressing all of those issues. It varies from state to state. Some states don't have it at all. Mm-hmm. Other states have very complete legal separations. And for example, in Illinois, you will be able to not only divide up assets and debts, decide how to take care of the children, put together a parenting plan, set up child support, all of those kinds of things are all addressed in an Illinois legal separation. Mm-hmm. Where on the other hand, in Georgia, for example, they don't technically have what's called legal separation. They have something that's called separate maintenance or separate alimony, in other words. So you stay married, but you really get support. You have to live separate and apart physically. Mm-hmm. You get support from the spouse, but it doesn't address all of the other issues like dividing up assets and so forth. Mm-hmm. So it's rather limited in what it provides.
Yeah. So it is something, if you're listening and you are not sure if this was a good option for you, this is an excellent opportunity, and something that you should do is reach out to a family law professional in your area, because this does vary state by state by state, and the term legal separation can just have very different meanings, consequences, and things like that. So you want to make sure you're getting the correct information, because I would venture to say, even going on Google, you're going to be very unlikely to get the correct information in this particular space, because the term legal separation is used so widely for so many different things. And like you were saying, here in Georgia, we have separate maintenance, and people actually do file that in the court system. Do they have to file it with the court system also in Illinois?
Yes. It's a very similar process. And many times I will tell people that if you're not quite sure whether you want to be divorced or whether you want a legal separation, let's say you're just not quite there yet, you're not emotionally ready, you might be worried what the children may feel about it or what have you, that really going through a legal separation is costly and provides you some benefits, but not significant benefits when it comes to the cost in terms of getting it. So for example, in Illinois, a divorce and a legal separation are going to cost you about the same.
Okay.
So if you decide that you're going to divorce down the road, you've spent the money twice.
Yeah, exactly. I say that to people when, I meet with them here in Georgia as well, as, if you're ultimately looking at a divorce, you may have to renegotiate the same terms. You could say these terms will be then incorporated into a future divorce action. But one thing I find that happens is just the passage of time makes those agreements that people work so hard on stale. The market has gone down, the market has gone up, somebody sold a house, there's just different circumstances that then cause it to be sort of all redone. But there are certain groups of people who actually really gravitate towards a legal separation, and it might be a good option for them. And let's talk about those individuals. Who would you actually recommend it to?
Well, typically speaking, I would recommend it to individuals who are on their spouse's health insurance, for example, and the likelihood that they will be able to obtain their own health insurance for a reasonable premium. Those people are probably going to want to stay married and do a legal separation. That would be really applicable for people who live in states that don't have great private health insurance options. Different states have different governmental sites that allow you certain opportunities. Some are more costly than others. Or it may be a situation where someone has a very detrimental disease or health condition that causes insurance in general to be very expensive. And usually, not always, but usually your employer plan is probably the less costly for the most bang for your buck, in other words. Premiums are less costly, but yet you still get some reasonable coverage that doesn't cost you an arm and a leg if you were to go out on the private sector and attempt to get it for just you on a solo policy.
Yeah, that's a situation I've seen a lot. Is actually somebody who is very ill and, potentially, cancer as an example, and they're going to be going through some long-term treatment. And they're like, I don't want to have to change my providers or my treatment plan or really anything at all. And so let's just do this legal separation until I can get through this, rough patch. So that might be a good option for people. Anybody else that you might recommend it to?
Well, there are other people who have religious objections to divorce. Various different communities, Muslim community, Hindu community, Catholics, other Christians definitely have some stigma attached to divorce, and oftentimes their professionals in that religion are helpful in kind of navigating and negotiating a legal separation that we then can formalize with the court system so that it has some oomph to it, it has some teeth to it. They can enforce certain provisions if they need to down the road. So those are probably the two biggest scenarios where I see the issue come up. What I often tell people when they do bring it up is examine your reasons, examine why you want to do this. And if it's just because you're not sure if you want to stay married or get divorced, I often tell people that it might be worth your while. And again, depends on your state, so you definitely get advice from an attorney located and licensed in your state. But I often tell them sometimes it just is better to do kind of a trial separation physically. Get the courts involved just yet. Obviously, there may be exceptions to that rule if we're worried about temporary support or child support or alimony or something like that. But for the most part, you're going to get some of the same benefits emotionally if you physically separate. Sit down and figure out how you can have two households, for example, because it's always more expensive to have two households rather than one. But see what the budget will allow. Talk about how you're going to split up expenses. Talk about how you're going to share time with the children. And maybe put something together that will allow you to kind of have a practice separation and practice divorce in a sense.
And I think that's something people should know is available to them and through the Amicable Divorce Network would be, we would call it a temporary agreement. Or you could call it a separation agreement because we're in our own custom process. We can call it whatever we like. And you could say, this is what we're going to do and we're going to write it down, and it has some formality to it, and a professional can tell you, the things to look out for. And I've had people who say this is only going to be in place for 6 months because they've maybe already been sort of languishing in this, unknown area, and they do want there to be some conclusion. Other people leave it open-ended and never hear from them again. And I hope they're doing well and they've reconciled their marriage. I assume that that's the case. So there's a lot of flexibility, especially when you're out of court, to do these things. Or when people actually do file for divorce, they could actually get a court ordered or court agreed upon, or that they agree upon themselves and then submit to the court temporary agreement, which is how things are going to be while the divorce is pending. And sometimes people just need that. That's more what they mean than legal separation. They're like, how are we going to take care of things while we're working through this is more of the concern. So I think your point is good. Sort of think about what is your biggest concern? What is your goal here? And that can help the legal professional maybe guide you in the right direction.
Exactly. And the Amicable Divorce Network is so lucky that we have so many resources available. We have financial planners and people who can sit down with you and make a budget, because I know, believe me, it's hard for me to make a budget. So
Yeah.
I can make a budget with someone that you are contemplating moving on from. So it's good to take advantage of some of those professionals in the network so that you have good information to base your decisions on.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes just getting information can really calm down anxieties and the unknown, just to, sort of get the lay of the land and feel a little bit better about things. Another population of people or group of people that may benefit, I just was thinking of, is people who are in the military. Sometimes, and we don't have that as much right here where I'm at because we don't have a military base right here, but I've been involved in some cases where the spouse would lose military housing and other benefits, and perhaps they just want to be separated because of the kids and for those reasons. So I have seen legal separation be a benefit there as well. If somebody is contemplating this, what would you sort of direct them to about the pros and cons between looking at a legal separation versus actually filing for divorce?
Well, I think first you have to sit down and make a plan. You have to strategize to start with. So figure out what your goals are, figure out what you need to do, what you're trying to achieve, and kind of work backwards. It's kind of like how, if we were to prepare a trial, we often start with a closing argument and kind of work backwards from that. So do the same thing. Figure out what it is, what your goal is, what you're trying to accomplish, and then work backwards. Get the advice that you need from the different professionals, either in the Amicable Divorce Network, or reach out to your friends if you have colleagues, friends that have been through this, other military spouses that you might be friends with, for example. And definitely look to see what benefits you'll be losing through a divorce versus benefits that you really need, and use that kind of as your guide. And like I said, many times it's almost as expensive to go through a formal legal separation with the court than it is to go through an actual formal divorce, whether you do one through the Amicable Divorce Network where you're staying out of court and the documents are being filed with the court once you have everything complete, or if you take a more traditional route where you're filing your complaint or your petition right away for a divorce. Take a look at the cost-benefit analysis, see what it is that you're losing, see what it is that you might be gaining, and then sometimes, quite frankly, the freedom that you gain, the emotional stability that you gain from no longer being in the same household with maybe a toxic spouse or something like that might outweigh the financial issues, but it's a very personal choice. There's no one right answer for everyone. But I would start there with goals and kind of pros and cons on a sheet of paper to start with. Talk to your therapist, find out what he or she might suggest. There's a lot wrapped up above and beyond just the financial benefits, the risk of losing, certain military benefits, like you said, military housing. There's lots of options and lots of things to think about. So gather as much information as you can. Knowledge is power. I tell my people that all the time. The more knowledge you have, the better your decision making will turn out to be.
Yeah, a lot of times when I meet with people and I discuss these different options with them, they actually were misinformed either by the internet or a friend, and they're like, oh, I didn't know you could do this or that or whatever. So, do make sure that you're getting the correct information. And I think pointing out that go to your attorney with a goal. And really sort of sit with that. What is your ultimate goal? Is it to be apart from this person? Is it to be ultimately divorced? A lot of times people are asking this question because they're just not quite ready for the divorce, and they're sort of looking for a bridge, between the two. And so that's something that should be considered. But ultimately, I think where you're landing is correct. It can be an expensive process. It's never free, and you may be doing it twice if you do a legal separation and go all the way down the road with it and then turn around and do a divorce. So it's something to really weigh out and think about. So if people are listening to this, they would like to reach out to you and work with you, what is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Well, one of the easiest ways is to call my office. My law firm is Kathryn Harry and Associates. I have offices in Oak Brook, Illinois, as well as in Cumming, Georgia. And you can call 678-208-9200 or 630-472-9700. Or you certainly can reach out to me on Facebook. You can reach out to me through email if you prefer. But phone call is probably the best way to start. We'll give you that quick overview of how we work so that you have an idea of what to expect, and we will do our very best to help you reach your goals.
Sounds great. And if you're driving in a car and you couldn't write any of that down, just save this episode and come back because it will be in the show notes. And you can always find all of our members' information in the Amicable Divorce Network membership directory, which is on amicableddivorcenetwork.com and divorceamicably.com. Kathryn has more chapters in the book that she'll be coming back to discuss with us. And so hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss any of the episodes on this important content. Kathryn, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Tracy. It was my pleasure.
Well,